Good evening, everyone. Leah Mulhearn, co-chair of the Educational Affairs Committee. Apologies for being a few minutes late. We had some technical difficulties, but hopefully we are up and running correctly. This is our first Ed Affairs meeting of the 2024-2025 school year, and we have with us for the first time our brand new Assistant Superintendent, Siobhan Savage, and we're excited to have her with us tonight for her first full Ed Affairs meeting. And with that, we'll do a roll call, starting with Ms. Murphy.
Robin Murphy, present.
Leah Blitzstein, present.
Charles Williams, present.
Dan Schultz, present.
Jennifer Lemon, present.
Zachary Epps, present.
Pamela Henry, present.
And Leah Mulhearn, present. Thank you so much. I believe we have minutes to approve from our June meeting, if I can have a motion. Second. Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great. The motion carries. The minutes are passed, and we can move on to our robust but exciting agenda. And I will turn it over to Ms. Savage.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much for having us this evening for Ed Affairs. The Office of Education is really excited this year to be able to present to you as the Education Affairs Committee of the whole a number of different items that we plan to cover, and tonight's agenda in particular is a good one because it will really be situated in our strategic plan and also the identity of what Cheltenham School District is. So first I wanted to start with our essence and really talking about what it means to belong, become, and excel in Cheltenham School District, and the idea that we want to make sure that we're honoring the diversity of our students, of our families, and of our staff, connecting all of the work that we do with the why of the district, and really making sure that we are a place where students and staff feel as though they belong. And in doing that work, adhering to our vision and our mission statements as well. Connecting with the idea that we want to make sure that our students belong, engage, and they seek justice. We want to make sure that we impart upon all of our students the feeling that they are part of a larger community, that they belong here, and to really prepare them to excel as they leave us into adulthood or whether they transition into other school districts. But really just making sure that we give them the best opportunity and while they are here. And our mission in particular, making sure that we're providing not just resources to all of our students, but the inspiration to really engage in their education in ways that makes this a place that students want to be and that students want to come to every day. So our agenda for tonight is really situated in the strategic plan, and we did want to actually start out with a presentation from the Cheltenham Education Foundation, and we do have Dr. Hart with us. I am going to pivot to her presentation and hand the mic over to her. She has so graciously agreed to come and really share with us what the Cheltenham Education Foundation does and how we can partner better with them.
Great. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you so much. As Ms. Savage said, I'm Pam Hart. I'm the president of the Cheltenham Education Foundation, and I'm joined this evening with Betsy Conway. I was joking earlier. Betsy is all things Cheltenham. Grew up here, class of 67, taught at Elkins Park. Anywhere else? Just Elkins Park. Just Elkins Park. Yeah. Same house since 1948. And since she's retired, has been a huge member of our community and foundation. So I'm delighted to have just a couple of minutes to be able to talk a little bit about who we are and the work that we're engaged in. All right, great. So you can see from our mission that we are a nonprofit organization that was started in 1991 with the sole purpose of raising funds to be able to support innovative instruction and ultimately enhance the educational experiences of students. We also kind of shifted or expanded that goal in 2018, which I'll talk about a little bit later, to really support students as they're leaving Cheltenham High School as well. You can see here our board, which consists of current and former staff members, current and former parents, and community members. And I'm really delighted that we have three very amazing liaisons in our board, Pam Henry is our school board member, Kevin Kaufman and Fanny Tan. Really talented, hardworking, committed, innovative group of people who have been, I think, been able to do some really amazing things over the past couple of years. And hopefully when you see what we're doing, you'll be able to see that as well. So the two ways in which we support the school district is really through our innovative grants and scholarships for members of the senior class. So just each one of you play kind of a different role as your member of the school board, and we'll talk just a little bit about kind of the grants and kind of the grant process. So all staff members are eligible to apply for our grants. You can request up to $1,500. We release the application in April. We as a committee come together, review the applications. We partner with the school district to have them review those applications as well. We want to make sure that what we think is a really great idea is aligned with the strategic plan, with the mission, and able really to be able to be supported by the school district as well. Very often there are staff members who will apply for, let's say, a tech project, and we need to make sure that the platforms that they're asking for are very much aligned with what we're able to support. So it's that partnership that we have found to be really, really beneficial. We notify recipients in the summer, and then we do a big display for everyone to know when we have this welcome back in August. So this past year, we just awarded our most recent round of innovative grants. We awarded 26 grants, which were really about 34 staff members because we had people who worked in tandem together. All 7 buildings were represented in those recipients, and about 1,600 students, to the best of the information that was provided, were able to benefit from the grants. And we awarded $34,000, which for me is huge because last year we awarded about $23,000. And so the fact that we were able to increase that money this year for me was amazing. And it was really the result of a lot of very generous donations and some fundraising. And I'll talk a little bit about that as well. I think in your role as school board members, I'd love just to take a minute or two to take a look at the overarching themes of the grant applications and those that were awarded. So very much aligned with your mission and goals and really our needs of our students as well. So we always want to make sure that students are engaged in literature and growing as readers. The idea of really supporting project-based learning, not just at the high school, but some of the really cool and innovative ideas that are happening in our elementary and middle school and really set the foundation for what happens in the high school. Social emotional well-being, we know we're in a time where it's really, really paramount that we're very attentive to those needs, and there are a number of staff members who applied for those grants as well. The two that I really want to bring your attention to for this year is that we've, as a long-standing tradition in Cheltenham, have a very strong arts program, particularly the performing arts. And we know that with COVID, we kind of fell off a little bit, and we know that schools are really kind of getting recommitted to that work. And so we had a number of teachers at the high school who worked together to apply for $1,500 each to have about $6,000 to really be able to support some of the work at the high school as well. We also had a number of teachers from elementary to middle and high school who applied for grants to really kind of strengthen the robotics program. And so what we decided to do was to allocate about $10,000 separate from the money that we initially allocated for individual grants to be able to really put time and effort into building the performing arts program again. So we made a commitment moving forward that we will allocate additional funds, like a separate line item, if you will, for performing arts and for robotics as well. Because we're thrilled with the collaboration, we're thrilled with the innovation, and we want to do our part to be able to support that as well. I do want to just, we do ask for grant recipients to submit a mid-year report and an end-of-the-year report. And so I just chose 2 of many, just for you to kind of get a sense of just the impact that the grants have. I'm always so touched when people kind of reflect on the experiences. So one of the grants that we awarded last year was Girls with Grit, and you can get a general sense of just kind of the benefits of this program and the impact that it had on Cheltenham Elementary. The other is really from Sadie Michaels, who actually is graduating this year, a friend of my own daughter, and just the impact that we were able to make in the performing arts program last year for Shrek, and just her being able to kind of share that as well. So it's one thing for staff members to kind of give testimonies, but for students to say, my experience feels completely different because of this money for us really makes a world of difference and kind of gets us back to our why. Also, as I said before, beginning in 2018, we received a grant for, I think, $8,000 from the Force Foundation. And the president at the time, Laura Baldwin, said, I really would love for us to use this money for scholarships for members of the senior class. And we at that time had to take some time to really reflect on what would those scholarships look like, right? For those of you who participated in the award ceremony at the high school, we really spent a lot of time recognizing academic excellence, which is really, really important, athletic excellence, but as an organization, we really wanted to be able to honor and lift up kind of the unsung heroes that are often in classes who do amazing things but aren't always like out in front. So I just want to give you an opportunity just to kind of like look through the scholarships that we support and offer. I've highlighted just some key terms. So when we think about the students that we want to have apply to our scholarships, we want students who demonstrate an innovative idea or initiative or project, students who have demonstrated resiliency or perseverance, people who've made a passion for improving our community, students who value their experience in the city, right? So Joe Kircher, for those of you that are new to the community, one of the most talented, committed educators I ever worked with, was a longtime administrator, teacher here.
My principal for 17 years.
A quick aside to tell you just kind of how amazing he is. I won't use too much time because I know I'm on the clock, but when I was the principal in Myers on my very first day, at that time, he was the principal of both EP and Cedar Grove. It was like the middle years program. Even though he was responsible for 2 buildings, so hundreds of students and staff members, he called me on my very first day of school to say, I want you to have a great day, and we're so lucky to have you. And so 23 years later, I still remember that day. So the fact that he makes a contribution to the scholarship is a testimony to kind of who he is. You will see Barry Brooker, another longstanding, amazing educator in Cheltenham. His family continues a scholarship in his memory as well. As you kind of walk through, you'll see scholarships to offer money for students who are first gen, students who participate in PBL. We have, once again, another memorial scholarship for a student who died a couple of years ago, who was an amazing writer, and we want to be able to kind of keep her energy and her legacy going by honoring other people who were also committed to spoken word. You can just sort of see again, we're looking for students who've had some learning challenges, right? We work and live in a very complex time. We know that some students it becomes very difficult, for others they have to overcome a lot of obstacles, and we want to be able to highlight that. Our GRIT scholarship, which we're incredibly proud of, is awarded to a graduate for the Skills of Life program, right? So we want to be able to kind of kickstart them into the work that they're going to engage in after school as well. David Webb, huge advocate and part of our community for many, many years.
He was a school board member and I believe a commissioner, very dedicated school board member.
Finance officer.
Yeah.
And very, sorry.
He was the finance officer as well, not commissioner.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I love that you knew that.
I was a first year teacher and he was one of the board members. You know, you can be a little scary. New teachers. But he came up and introduced himself to me the first night of school board meeting and said, learn my name. And that's, Mr. Webb's family is now giving the scholarship.
So just to kind of get a general, sense there. One of the things, so we were very proud of the scholarships that we created over the past few years. And then last year, we recognized that a lot of our time and effort was really focused on students who were going to four-year colleges. And while that's amazing and incredible, that's not really the post-secondary experience for all of the students that are graduating. And we wanted to expand our scholarships to be able to kind of highlight the diversity. So this year we added 4 new scholarships. One is the Michelle Bellamy Memorial Scholarship, community member of our board who actually died just a couple of years ago, very unexpectedly. Huge lover of STEM, advocate for female students going into STEM. So she, her daughter at her daughters and the foundation partner in a scholarship in her memory. We have a scholarship for students who are going to technical, vocational, and apprenticeship programs, someone who wants to start their own business, and finally, students who are going to associate degrees as well. And so we just want to make sure that all students, regardless of who they are, see themselves in the senior class and are willing to apply for our scholarships. So this past spring, we have 17 scholarships. But we, as you can see, multiple students who were able to be awarded. We had 66 students who actually applied, and 31 recipients, and we intended to give $18,000, but we had some applications that were so amazing, we could not make a decision, and we had to find some dollars to make it happen. So once again, you can see the themes, which you were able to see on earlier slides, just to get a sense of kind of what our energy is and the ways in which we support students. So I'm going to keep going because I know I'm running out of time, but I'll save this for you all to look at. We do have some testimonials of 2 of the students who received grants. It really warms your heart, right? I can come and talk to you about it, but to really hear their words would be amazing. So you might be wondering to yourself, Pam Hart, how are you offering so much more money? What's going on? Really fundraising efforts. And so this slide really does highlight some of the things that we've been doing and have recently begun to do. So this past year, we started, Marion Bigland and Betsy Conaway kind of started shopping nights in various neighborhoods in our community as a way to thank businesses who have supported us and also support them to make sure that other people kind of know who they are and to do some small fundraising. And we're going to be doing them again this fall. So when you get that flyer, join us.
October, November, and December, one night, dine and shop, and you'll all be invited.
So mark your calendars. This past April, we had our inaugural Race for Education 5K, which took off right at Elkins Park, and it was fabulous. And we're hoping to kind of strengthen our partnership with the school district and kind of partner with PE teachers, have more kids participating as well. We kind of reinvigorated a tribute just for educators as well. So for the winter holidays and the end of the year, rather than getting a mug or a sweater, although I always love a Starbucks gift card, the idea of making a contribution to the foundation in honor of educators that have made a difference is something that we're hoping to continue. And then also our Donald Block event in June that a number of you have already participated in. We have donors who are incredibly generous. Some small donors, some donors have sponsored scholarships and kind of continue to give over time, which we're really very grateful for. And we do have members of the staff who do participate in annual deduction. It is an area that we want to kind of build back up, and we're going to kick off an annual fund this coming year as a result of that. I want to because I know there's some numbers people in the group, and I just want to be able to kind of show just really briefly just a 5-year income statement. Just really the trends are, if you look at 2019 and 2023, we are raising more money and we're able to give more money to grants and scholarships. And then you can also just kind of see in the pie chart just where the money is coming from. The corporate or organizational donations are actually payroll deduction. Some of the fundraising, we have restricted donations as well as unrestricted donations. And then you'll see that the vast majority of our money is spent giving money to scholarships and grants. We try very hard to really not have any additional expenses. So we are hoping that all of you in this space and everybody who is watching will mark your calendars when you see the new share coming up or any of the information to join us for our dine and shopping nights. That people will know that our 5K is going to happen in April, so we can start walking and running and practicing now, so we can get ready. And then also for families who might be watching, and those of you who are here at the table, to be able to honor the educators that made a difference in the lives of your children, and then to join us at Dine on Block. Thank you. So having said that, I just want to say thank you for your support. It's been amazing. I have a senior, this is like her swan song year. And so I know firsthand from my role as principal and the role that my daughter and my son have had in the school district, It's been an amazing place for them, for us as a family, and it's really, I think we will say collectively, our honor to be able to be in this role, and to do everything we can to really support your work. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here, so I really appreciate it a lot. So thank you.
Absolutely.
If you can feel the energy and enthusiasm you just got from Pam Hart, that's how she runs the foundation. So see why we are so successful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So I want to thank the Cheltenham Education Foundation again for joining us this evening and sharing more about what they do, why they do it, and how they do it. I certainly plan on attending the 5K and Cheltenham and the Dines on their wall. I had no idea that it existed. So I'm excited about that. But moving through the rest of our agenda for this evening, the next topic that we're going to discuss is really the Educational Affairs Committee meeting agenda and topics for this school year. And then we will have a strategic plan review, and we will also have a federal programs review. We will try to make sure that these presentations are condensed so that you get the information that you need without, being overly drawn out. And we will start with the Educational Affairs Committee this year. So just to give you a very high level overview of what you're going to see, we actually have put together and are thinking about the meeting agendas and the topics to be in alignment with multiple requirements that we have, not just at the local level, but also at the federal and also at the state level. We do have a number of compliance requirements this year coming up from the Pennsylvania Department of Education. We would really like to remain transparent in that and make sure that we are sharing with the community and with the Educational Affairs Committee all of the things that we are, thinking about in terms of comprehensive planning, for example, flexible instruction days. So we plan to situate a lot of that conversation here. So you'll see in September, we are already at this meeting and we are going to cover the plan for the year. But in October in particular, we will present a draft of an academic calendar, and it will just be a draft as required by board policy, but we will be engaging in a larger, more strategic plan to involve stakeholders and gather input around proposed academic calendars for the 25-26 and 26-27 school year. And we have already started that recruiting effort in terms of putting that academic calendar committee together. We also will have our elementary schools come and present some data. But in November, you will see our intermediate and secondary schools to present the data. Therefore, you won't have all 7 schools in one night. We decided to break them up so we can get into deeper depth. In November, we also will talk about our comprehensive plan and what the planning will look like for this year and for the upcoming 3 years. Invitations have gone out as well to a comprehensive planning steering committee. In December, you will see some information really around our secondary school, Cheltenham High School, and we're going to look at some course proposals and also receive a progress report on the empowerment program in Cheltenham, which so far this year has been off to a just phenomenal start. You will also get a strategic plan update because we plan to provide progress monitoring reports over the course of this year around how we are implementing our strategic plan. On January 21st in particular, we will review and hold a comprehensive plan, and we will be taking comments so that we can actually implement those comments and then post it for public review, because obviously there's a whole mechanism here whereby we will accept public comment as well before we present it to the board for final approval.
Now, I'm gonna just take a point of privilege and insert myself to the commitment of both myself and Mrs. Savage. You guys are not aware, and this would have been a good trivia question. It is both of our birthdays on that day. We share the same birthday, but
January 21st.
January 21st.
Wow.
But we will both be here. So just want to put it out.
Right? How is that possible?
I'm sorry, please.
That's okay.
Please
I'm serious.
We're gonna order.
I like this point of
We're gonna have
privilege.
balloons and confetti and.
Yes. So in February, you will actually receive a written strategic plan report as well as an update and progress monitoring on the special education plan, which I recognize was actually going through last year, planned for and submitted to the state. So you will actually hear from our special education community around how that plan has been implemented. In March, you will hear about the student services plan. This is actually the last year of implementation of the student services plan. And next year we will go into a rewriting cycle around that. So we will actually talk about that in March. You will also have an opportunity to review the flexible instructional day application and understand what that process looks like. Right now, Cheltenham School District does not have an approved flexible instructional day application with the state of Pennsylvania. Therefore, we cannot use flexible instruction days. If we have an inclement weather day, we have to call an actual student day. So in considering what that looks like, we want to make sure that everybody is aware of the purpose of flex days and also how we actually apply for those. And then in March as well, we're going to talk about elementary report card implementation because the plan at this point is to implement a new elementary report card for the 25-26 school year. In April, you will have the STEM PBL showcase, which I'm excited for because I've never attended, but I hear they're fantastic. In May, we will have a joint meeting with the policy committee. We will hear about our graduation report as well as hear how our students are doing in terms of meeting the Act 158 pathways. And we actually got some data around that, which was good today. The students have already grabbed hold of that and are starting to look at pathways for themselves. So that's been great. And we will also talk about planning for EPIC for the 25-26 school year. And then in June, we'll have our final strategic plan update for the school year. I did add a note here that some of these topics may change over the course of the year, but the intent is to stick with this as closely as possible, but also understanding that we might have to have some flexibility in terms of, things that may arise or things that we might have to actually implement or think about presenting for. All right.
Can I stop you real quick?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So that was awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I just want to break to do questions on that section.
Absolutely.
They're already
I can take it back to the.
just, so if there are any more questions about the calendar for the year. Any questions? Oh,
Just a comment.
yeah.
Thank you. This is always, Ed Affairs has been the committee that I think sets the tone of how we can plan and advertise to our community what's coming up. This is very robust and I'm excited for the presentations.
Thank you for that.
I also want to acknowledge, as I saw a lot of people also were excited that we have the elementary presentation separate from the others. I think it just allows everybody to absorb the information a little bit better. And I think it's a great, thank you.
Yes. Dr. Riley, are there any questions or hands raised?
There are not.
Thank you. All right. No questions or comments. We will move to. Thank you.
So with our strategic plan review, I'm going to actually bring up a separate deck for that. And what we really wanted to do with the strategic plan review was give you a year one review in terms of what we have already accomplished, and then preview what we plan to accomplish this year during the 24-25 school year. And we do have our directors from the Office of Education here to actually report out on different pillars. And we can actually jump right into it. And again, thinking about the mission and the vision statement of the Cheltenham School District and making sure that we're aligning our work to everything that the mission and the vision statement stand for, to keep us aligned and thinking about how we are moving forward for children. So there was a 3-step plan development process. We went through 3 phases where we thought about how we were going to engage the community. We made sure that we were focusing and creating a framework to give us some priorities and action planning steps. And we are now in phase 3 where we're actually executing this plan and we're trying to figure out how we move forward even beyond this plan as we're looking past this 3-year frame. The strategic plan itself involves 7 pillars. And the Office of Education actually involves the first 5 pillars in particular. But we work closely with communications and with infrastructure, facilities, and finance, because obviously we are here to serve children and we want to make sure that we're aligned across departments. So we have been having, cross-disciplinary conversations around how we can best implement the plan. And we did actually develop, as part of the strategic plan, some action plans for all 7 of these pillars, and we are acting on those action plans at this point in time, starting with the portrait of a graduate. So Dr. Scriven, actually, I'll let you start, Dr. Scriven.
Sure. Thank you so much. So you guys have kind of heard this from me before. And I'm going to get some leverage as we move through this year. Portrait of a graduate is our North Star. It's the blueprint. It's families understanding, students understanding, and as a district understanding what the continuum looks like. And we're really shifting. I don't say K through 12 anymore. I say K through 16. And that's part of the work, because we also need to have an idea of how our students are doing beyond high school, in whichever pathway they so desire to take. So I owned this last year. I've already bounced past it to Siobhan and her team, because that's really where the work lies. But we are in the process of establishing a fluid committee, which are really going to take a look twofold. One is the exemplars of what we feel that 21st century student should look like as they're matriculating. And part of the work is what the ed team is doing in terms of clearly delineating what our pathways look like. And I think you guys, as we just had our retreat, will really be able to do a crosswalk as we're looking at what are the metrics that we need to be looking at as kids are moving K through 12, especially in literacy in 3rd grade, right? And we're going to really be unpacking that data and then looking at as our students are moving through our school district, what seem to be the academic pathways that they are taking, and really trying to quantify what that looks like once they hit the high school. So that's going to be the work. Part of that is also the alignment of that instructional framework and the work we're doing around curriculum. So you're going to see a lot of intersectionality as we move through the plan, which is okay. But I think really, our narrative, what we stand for, really being able to see that called out so that individuals know what the expectations are and what we're marching toward are going to really help us. I'm excited because you guys have a baseline, and that's how I want you to look at this entire review right now, as a baseline. And we'll have another opportunity. Really, I know there'll be checkpoints as we go through, but I'm really looking forward to the end of the year, so we can kind of do that side by side of what you heard tonight and then what's going to be presented at the end of the year, because we are gaining momentum and getting the right pieces of the puzzles together. So that's.
And just to follow up on that, during Leadership Academy in particular, we took a look at the competencies that were developed by Principal Lytle and Principal DeAndrea as part of the committee work that was initially done. And we are in the process of reaffirming and confirming that the competencies that were elevated in that plan are the right competencies. Because obviously, for next steps for this particular school year, we want to actually do a district-wide communication program. So as we are beginning to align what we do to these competencies of our graduate, that we expect all of our students to actually, the competencies we expect all of our students to graduate with, we want to make sure that parents are aware, that students are aware, our teachers are aware, And that is the next big work in this pillar in particular, because we have competencies. I don't think that people know that we have competencies, but we want to make sure that we get that out there.
We did it within a smaller targeted group of probably 18 people. And we need to be more collaborative to bring more folks into the conversation. So we're going to do that.
Yep. So our second pillar is around teaching and learning. And at this point, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Riley and Ms. Collins. They can talk next about what they have done for this particular pillar, both last year and what they have planned for this year.
Good evening. So Pillar 2 is all about the teaching and learning curriculum work that started a couple years ago. Shortly after Ms. Collins and I arrived, there was a curriculum audit which outlined the work that we're trying to accomplish through this year's, this current version of the strategic plan. And so in doing so, there are two strategies as we approach that work. One is in curriculum development. The other one is designing a system of continuous improvement. And so we've engaged in that work over the last couple of years, but have sort of a refocus around how we're doing that. And we'll get into some of those highlights as it relates to both curriculum as well as continuous school improvement.
Good evening, everyone. So for completed tasks for the 23-24 school year, we identified K-12 courses for curriculum design for ELA, math, and social studies and science. So that work is currently being done over the summer. We had teachers who actually worked on curriculum development that I'll speak to later in terms of action plans that they worked over the summer to help us to begin to support our teachers in actual implementation for this school year. We adopted curriculum evaluation tool, trying to take a look at and ensuring that our resources are reflective of our student body and also prepare students for the world that they will go into once they leave Cheltenham School District. We had to create the curriculum design teams. We talked about that work from elementary and secondary. We had curriculum for K-6 ELA and math courses are partially complete with implementation plan for 24-25 school year, which is happening now in most grades for K-6. Common assessments for K-6 ELA and math, they are partially complete and teams are still working throughout the school year, in addition to conversations across grade level teams about what the common assessment should look like has been happening as well. We had hosted those horizontal and vertical articulation meetings. That was really important and eye-opening for us in the district in the spring, because although we all teach maybe the same grade, even in the same building, doesn't mean that instructionally, every kid was getting the same thing, although they had common resources. So having those discussions across grade teams and then across the district, and then vertical conversations about what's happening for the grades coming that we're receiving kids or grades that are leaving, just to ensure that we can clearly delineate what's happening at each level. We established a 6-year curriculum renewal cycle. We started the implementation of inquiry-based social studies program, Inquire Ed, K-6. We started designing an elementary standards-based report card. So the base of the report card is completed, but with that goes the assessment piece that, as you will see, we will continue that work into this school year. And we piloted and identified core resources for replacement ELA in mathematics and special education as well. And we piloted and identified supplemental resources for ELA in grades 7 and 8. We worked with Penn Literacy Network coaching for teachers in grades K-6. And then ELA teachers in grades 7 through 12 last school year, and developed a continuum evidence-based ELA and math interventions for students with IEP during the 23-24 school year.
So that was the first strand around curriculum. This is what happened this past year in the continuous school improvement strategy. And a lot of the work that Ms. Collins just presented is due to the fact that we were able to accomplish step 1 here in terms of hiring the data and curriculum specialist, Rachel German and Katie Ferraro, who every time we meet, I wonder how we got anything done before they got here. Because they churn out work like no other. So a lot of credit to bringing them on board and getting them integrated in the Department of or Office of Education last year. And they were able to bring in a lot of teachers, as Ms. Collins said, this summer to get a lot of our work in curriculum common assessments done. So a lot of credit to the two of them. We also went and looked at where are we collecting data on students. There's a lot of data sets out there, and not just academic data, but we're trying to pull all of our data resources together. As you know, we use Linkit as the data warehouse, and we're always uncovering additional data sources. So we want to be able to bring all those all together so that when we think and talk about students, we're talking about them across all aspects of their experience here. Last year, we went through an entire school year of professional development led by Dr. Pimentel in terms of the continuous school improvement. Principals got training. They turned that training around for their teachers. We had a couple meetings this summer. We brought in groups of teachers to continue that work in July. And that's going to be part of what you're going to hear in October and November when principals present on their data and what the plans are for continuous school improvement moving forward into the upcoming or the current school year. Continue to upload all of our data sources that we can get our hands on into Linkit. We did launch the parent and student portal in Linkit last year, so now there's a little bit more access in terms of viewing what data we have available for our students through that same platform that we use for collecting the data. For our MTSS process last year, we purchased and did some training on something called Intervention Manager. So that is the tool that we use for interventions in terms of designing intervention plans as well as tracking those for MTSS. In addition to launching Intervention Manager for MTSS, we provided professional development at all the schools. That has been varied depending on how quickly schools adopted that and were able to move forward. To continue to do that work this year as well. Again, Katie and Rachel have been part of that process in terms of bringing Intervention Manager on board and then helping support the training as it relates to the use of Intervention Manager for MTSS. We're in the process of still, and I know it sounds like we've already done this, analyzed and evaluated data visualizations. That's a challenging task, and so that's work that we're continuing to do this year. We have not settled on how we want to move forward with that. That being said, Linkit has made some adjustments to their platform that allow us some more flexibility around visualizations. They're not great. There are better platforms out there, but it's a step forward for us. So we are going to be providing some training on the use of the new dashboards in Linkit as it relates to data visualization. And then the last thing is we finalized submitted the 2024 Act 158 graduation data, at which we had a 96.3% graduation rate last year. And then lastly, empowerment program in Cheltenham was designed and is currently being implemented. Just real quick, when you see links, I know there's a link under Portrait of a Graduate, which links to information about PBL in the district. The link here for the EPIC is a link to the June Ed Affairs presentation. So if anyone missed that or wants to refresh their memories about what EPIC is all about, the link for EPIC is here.
So for 2024-2025 school year, our next steps, which are currently in way, we're going to publish the curriculum blueprint on the website so that when you take a look at it, you can see for our curricular areas, all the goals for our courses K through 12, and then be able to link and see the actual curriculum documents as it pertains to that course. As we build the curriculum and load it, it will upload into the blueprint, which is nice about the research we're using in terms of developing curriculum, so that it'll be out facing to the public, so that anyone can go click on the website and see what their student would learn at any grade level. We'll continue our development of K-6 curriculum for ELA and mathematics to include the common assessments. As I stated previously, we started that work. They were mostly majority done. We just need to finish and make sure that we have all the aligned common assessments. Continued development of 7 to 12 ELA, math and social studies curriculum as well. And then also continue to plan and review resources relative to implementation of still standards. Continue, right now, we have embedded the previously written, we had Dr. Andy Fishman work with the district a few years ago with our teachers K through 8 in developing writing curriculum. Through the pandemic, when it became difficult to teach writing online, some of that work kind of fell to the wayside. We brought that back as a part of our curriculum work this year. Teachers are revisiting implementation of the writing curriculum, and we will, at the end of the year, assess and make modifications accordingly, just because the terms of the instructional time that's required for full implementation and what makes sense and what we currently have as our literacy block in K to 8. We will come to you for board approval for the 6-year curriculum renewal cycle in regards to where we see how we will develop curriculum over a 6-year time span. That's cyclical, in a way it's cyclical, but also knowing that maybe in 1 year, maybe monitor an additional year just because of where we are in terms of resources in development. Common assessments for the standards-based elementary report card. We had a report card developed, but we didn't have all the assessments to help parents and educators determine what was appropriate assessment for each student. So we wanted to ensure that we go back, make sure we have all these we have all the common assessments in place, so that we can then ensure that when parents know, when they're looking at standards-based report card, how my student received that grade or how they received that assessment. Like, what does it mean to be proficient, and how did we assess that? So that was important, and also be given us opportunity to educate parents about the standards-based report card and what that means. Because you could be meeting the standard, it doesn't mean that your child is behind, but because the standard is an end of year standard, they just may not have met, gotten to the point of proficiency yet. In addition, we open Epic, and we continue to monitor the success of our students there. We continue to work very closely with administration there and teachers to ensure they have what they need to support our students who are in the program. And then this year, we're working on developing a K-12 English language development framework for our ELL learners. Explicitly, we have seen some growth in our ELL department over the last few years, especially post-pandemic, the number of students that we're servicing. So we want to make sure that we have a public-facing document that articulates our program K-12, and that the parents and community know what they have access to if their students come here and need of English language service.
Continuing next steps, more on the data side again. We are working on creating a data governance plan. There's a couple different components to this. One as it relates to our student data that I referenced earlier. One as it relates to the use of technology and data and privacy, as it relates to the use of applications. And so we as a team have started to brainstorm all the components that need to be part of that data governance plan, and we'll continue to work on that throughout the school year. Second one is just planning for creation of various data dashboards. What we want to be able to do is share data in a more digestible way. So right now, if you were to look at all of our data, it's just tables of numbers, which don't have a lot of meaning. So what we want to do is be able to present that in a way that's, first of all, more visual and easier for when you're looking at data, anyone's looking at data. It's easy to make sense of what you're seeing. Dr. Katzenbone and his team are now working on the implementation of pilot replacement resources that were piloted last year in special ed for both math and ELA this year. Piloting K4 ELA and assessment dashboard for special ed as well. Dr. Pimentel developing the gifted framework for identifying and serving students. PLN was referenced earlier as well as something that we were doing last year. For this year, PLN coaching is going to be applied for all of our teachers in grades K and 1, and then also using a trainer model for our K4 principals, our data and curriculum specialist, our supervisor of gifted professional learning, as well as our director of curriculum and instruction for humanities.
All right, now before I move on into the next pillars, I thought I would pause and take questions up to this point. Because I think teaching and learning really is like the meat of what the strategic plan is. And you can see from what was just shared by Dr. Riley and Ms. Collins, there has been a lot of work in that realm over the last year. And we have a lot of things planned for this year that have already kicked off as well.
Certainly, a lot of things happening, and appreciate the effort that's being put forth on behalf of our community and students. Just first, I guess, was a comment around the sort of the instructional conversations, the vertical and horizontal articulation. Definitely see that informing the conversation that was earlier around the portrait of a graduate as well. Which I guess, as I hear it, is more of a comprehensive, no matter where you are, or no matter what grade you're in, here's what some of the expectations to have, which I appreciate, because in other places I've seen the portrait of a graduate focus on that graduation moment, and then what do you need at the graduation and what can you look at, but really this more of a comprehensive approach, I appreciate. There was something mentioned around, it was one of the first 20, what happened this year around some work about students with IEPs. It was one of the first slides. Yeah, for teacher pilot. Okay, yeah, could you just share a little more about that? Like what
the pilot work or the?
I think it's that one, the develop the K-2 continual evidence base. Is this the
Yeah.
first slide that was
That
shared?
is the first slide. So the evidence-based ELA and math interventions for students who have individualized that.
Those were the pilots that then will be introduced.
They're being implemented now.
Implemented this year.
Yes,
Okay.
they started the Ready Classroom, ILET and Success Maker at the high school, iReady and Ready Classroom K-8, with the exception of K-4, which is pilot in magnetic reading, which is all, we talked about that in spring, and we got the materials, and we're off and running it.
Right. Oh, good deal. Good deal.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I didn't hear. So there. And then on the just curiosity, the data governance one, just based off of some of the examples you shared, to what extent will or would that include like guidance around artificial intelligence, so that type of technology?
That's a good question. Do you want to answer it or want me to?
Just enter it in the chat GPT.
Yeah, but it's part of, I mean, if it's part of that plan, that's enough for now, but if it's like, hey, not be, because we're having conversations like how to address it as a district. I know through the policy committee, we've been thinking about it,
Yes.
and I had conversations with the solicitor recently.
So just to,
Yeah.
I'll jump in.
And I don't want to duplicate efforts, so it's like.
Right now, when we're really referencing data governance, we're talking about, as a district, having checks and balances with the technical resources that are being used, right? And really, having data analytics around, you guys had mentioned before, right? The resources that we're using in the district. Well, we need to be able to quantify what is the impact of those resources, right? And we've never had a structure or a team to really analyze all of that. So that's, when we're referencing data governance, it's just making sure we don't have teachers with all these one-offs that have been unimproved. We're looking at the resources that are currently being used, and both by teachers and students, and the impact that they're having. So we're just putting structures in place to really gauge the effectiveness of what it is that we're implementing. Your point would really fall more under the Office of Innovation around the whole AI piece. And I'm always going to be very honest with you guys. We're considering how to start to dive in. It's been a lot of training of teachers around a lot of the AI materials. People are kind of, all districts right now are still kind of staying away from taking a stance right now, but we do have to unpack it. And I think as a board, that would be a conversation that we would need to have around what are the expectations for how we look at using that as an instructional tool or a resource, because it's going to have implications for policy and procedure, right? So it's a twofold. It's the governance piece, and then it's how we're going to operationalize it. And that's a conversation we haven't had.
So, yeah, that's helpful, that's helpful. So, and in some ways it might inform it, because we'll see what's currently happening to what extent, and then, informs the other conversation. So, yeah, that's very helpful.
I also just want to add, like, from the board perspective, as you're thinking about policy, governance, protocols, there is this piece of this around, like, what do we teach students as far as artificial intelligence goes? And I think we're kind of waiting for your guidance around what that could possibly look like, because I have had a few principals raise the idea of digital literacy, as well as some folks on our tech side, and figuring out, like, if we were to build a curriculum around that, what does that mean, and where do we situate it, how do we resource it? So that's one of those things that we would definitely appreciate your guidance and your governance.
Yeah. I won't say anything else about that tonight, so for the whole other.
Let me just add,
Appreciate it.
our company is looking at that too. It's a very fluid conversation, because first of all, it's identifying what it means and what it means in the context of the entity that you're in. And then there are laws and regulations around certain entities, around some specific AI. So that's a very broad conversation that we probably won't tackle real quickly, but it is worth the continuing conversation around it until we get to that place and looking at the solicitors, advice around what we should be doing. That sort of thing.
Ms. Lindsay, just to add one thing to that, and that is thinking about states that are now requiring media literacy instruction in schools, and if they're not, they should be. And we can think about possibly getting in there. I think that all of our kids need that kind of instruction, and we need to integrate that into basically everything that we do, because they're getting handed Chromebooks in kindergarten, right? So they need to have that. We need to teach them how to use it, effectively and safely, and that AI is just a piece of that, obviously, but that would be a way in, just for food for thought, for planning purposes.
Any other questions about teaching and learning before we move on? Thank you.
All right, so I have the next pillar, social, emotional, and mental health. So as always, we are trying to increase the supports that we can offer our students, because we know that if we address their social, emotional, and mental health, it will increase their academic outcomes. So some of the things that we accomplished last school year is we created a structure and a framework for our MTSS process. Just to kind of get the ball rolling, like how do we run these meetings so they're more efficient and really addressing student needs? And then with that, with the assistance of Katie and Rachel, we created an MTSS toolkit that is accessible for all of our staff and for our administrators. The staff was trained in intervention manager and Linkit. It was a very broad overview. So we're seeing this year how we can actually make this work. And they are open to it and receiving the additional training that is needed to really make this come to fruition in that system. We did a universal screener through Linkit, the SRSSIE, which we will also be implementing again in October of this school year, which is a data point that we can use in our MTSS system to kind of gauge what internalizing and externalizing behaviors our teachers are seeing with our students. So this is a teacher-led screener. We implemented a drug and alcohol counselor through the Lincoln Center at our high school. She was there 1 day per week. And then we got grant funded 2 clinicians from Elkins Park through Four Walls organization, that it was a female clinician and a male clinician that were there 3 days per week. And then our students in grades 6 through 12, 6, 8, 10, and 12 participated in our Pennsylvania Youth Survey last school year. And then we got a grant from PCCD of 152 that we were able to utilize for additional counseling support in the district for this upcoming school year. And so some of the things we're looking forward to, I already mentioned, the work that we're continuing to do with MTSS, making sure that all of our teams are trained in intervention manager, kind of taking into the baseline, the tier 1 checklist, making sure that's completed by our teachers. And then if the students' needs are not being addressed by those tier 1 interventions, and making sure they're aware of how to do the request for assistance or to go to our advanced tiers meetings. So again, the full implementation of that system we are working on for this particular school year. We would like to provide targeted support to students based on their areas of need for the pay survey. What I will point out is vaping is an issue. So that is something that we are actively addressing. We have some great contacts with Cheltenham Communities That Care, as well as Aldersgate. So we're in the process of scheduling parent sessions as well as student-led sessions for the risk factors and things that parents should look out as far as vaping, and things that students should be aware if they choose to engage in that behavior, hoping that they don't choose to engage in that behavior once they have the knowledge and the information. We will continue with the SRSSIE for this school year. We will be implementing it in the fall and the spring, and that information will be housed in Linkit. We are working with Project Aware, and we are implementing the BH Works, which is a student-led screener. The way we're going to implement this school year is through a pilot at Elkins Park and Cedarbrook. They received training in August during our professional development. So if a student comes out as high risk on the SRSSIE, then they will meet with their counselor and they will do the BH Works screening, see what additional supports we can offer them, or if they need some outside supports, we would set them up with those services as well. We have a counselor through Triumph Counseling Services at Epic. She is doing a phenomenal job. She is in those classrooms. She is getting to know the students. She is engaged, and she's working really well with our staff and our students. And then we will be reviewing our PBIS processes and procedures and making sure they better align with our SEL programming. One thing that is not on there is our high school counselors are going to have access to an SEL curriculum Rethink Ed. They have a training coming up next Wednesday to get reacclimated to the system. We have a new mental health and wellness counselor at the high school. And so as she is preparing for her groups and working with students, this will be something that she can really take the lead on and provide those resources to the staff as needed.
Right. Thank you so much, Ms. King, for that. Pillar 4, diversity, equity, belonging, and inclusion. Dr. Ketchum Bone and I have been working together on this, and Dr. Cat will actually start with a review of what was done last school year, and then we'll talk together about what we're doing for this school year.
Sure. As you can see there, you've seen this before, our primary goal is to continue the integration of diversity, equity, belonging, and inclusion into our district culture. Some of the strategies that we've used thus far to communicate transparently and consistently with the school community about this, progress and challenges. So we do have challenges as we move through this. A lot of these are not comfortable conversations, not comfortable topics for our staff, and even for our students, and even for us as administrators. That cultural competence, unconscious bias, and really just, we say the term inclusive teaching practices, but what does that really mean? Review and revise curriculum materials to incorporate, as Ms. Collins mentioned, diverse perspectives, voices, and contributions. Integrate that content and that addresses those social justice issues and promotes that cultural understanding across various subjects. Implement the restorative practices through that Debbie lens, helping that teaching and learning environment across the district for students and staff. And as always, we're collecting and analyzing this data, student achievement, discipline. As you can see, it's been mentioned, PBIS, through what Ms. Keene talked about, the data piece that Dr. Riley talked about, Ms. Collins, and then that's what we're doing too, collecting that data too in our special ed place as well. But we really want to just really zone in on those key metrics to identify and address the existing disparities that we have based on race, ethnicity, gender, and other factors. Establishing those partners with community organizations and advocacy groups to support. And you can see down there, our performance measures at this point is communicating out through social media, always looking for community feedback, which not only includes our school board, but anybody in the community, whether even if they don't have children in the district, right? Come forward. What are they hearing? What do they think about our district? Really diving in our incident and discipline data, not just looking at it from a raw number standpoint, but really disaggregating that data down to gender and race and all the other factors that I mentioned up there. They talked about the curriculum audit through teaching and learning. We're increasing our presence in the classrooms all the way up through central office, doing classroom walkthroughs. You know, sometimes you can go in 5, 10 minutes, you can really get a good picture of what you're seeing in that time, communicating with the staff and the students, asking them how they are and what they're doing and what they're learning and and how they see things. And then, of course, student belonging surveys.
So the things that were previously completed really had to do more with these individualized projects that occurred across schools, because we actually did, in conjunction with Dr. Robinson over at Glenside, kind of dig into the historical context here in the district and begin to try and assemble a timeline of all the initiatives that have been done around diversity, equity, belonging, and inclusion over time. Because what we are interested in doing as we are approaching this school year in particular is not necessarily repeating work that has already been done, but reinvigorating the work and also making sure that we pay attention to more than just the black-white binary, and thinking about how we are increasing inclusiveness for multiple underserved and marginalized populations of students over time. So we are looking at updating the cultural proficiency framework and implementing the special education framework from K-12 in particular. The Title I regulations, we actually just had our first 90-minute Title IX training with all of the principals and the assistant principals in the district right before this meeting. So we have actually started that as well. We did reach out to the Pacific Education Group as well as a couple of other groups to discuss what programming could possibly look like in schools, but I just want to put out there that the cost is actually astronomical. It's a lot of money. So what we have been doing instead is we are recultivating and we have reconvened our DEBI community and our committee. We're also looking at the stipended positions in all of the schools as far as the cultural competency work. And the plan is to provide folks with really good training so that they can continue these conversations in their buildings, but also diversify what that training looks like. So there'll be a number of different things that will be coming down the pike for board consideration, particularly around how we're using professional development time, because we might actually be looking to engage some experts in this area. So I will pause there before I jump into climate and culture. Any question about pillars 3 and 4?
One for each first. Also encouraged behind the updates that we've heard to this point. One question around the counseling line item, around the grant, that was the PCCD grant, just may not be alone on the board, but whenever I see additional counseling support that we're paying for with the grant right now, it feels it reads temporary but feels long term. And so I just wanted a question around if there's intention behind continuing that work after, or if that grant is something that, is renewed on an annual basis and we can continue to seek that funding to ensure that we can have the additional counseling, or maybe not, maybe it's not additional, maybe it is just the expansion of the counseling model that we have. So it is the entirety of the model as opposed to like additional.
You want to?
For now, these grants have been yearly. Actually, you have one that I'm submitting at the end of this week. And so it's continuing the work that we're already doing. So yeah, it does seem temporary, but they seem to come out just about every year, in the same amount, if not more.
And they're usually in addition to what we budget for in terms of our actual counseling positions. So these grants are actually used to pay for the additional counseling through contracted services. They are not used to pay for our staff directly. So when Ms. Keene talks about, for example, the contract with the Lincoln Center or Triumph Counseling, those are actually third-party providers that we contract with, and we use these grant funds to pay for.
Thank you. That provides a lot of clarity for me. One additional question for me about, well, not even a question, actually a comment, in our DEBI space is just encouraged behind the effort to want to reinvigorate the cultural proficiency cadres. I know some years ago in my time joining the board, I know that was a very specific targeted action that the district was taking that quite frankly, felt like it was growing and developing with a lot of catalysts in each building and folks like really moving it. So I'm encouraged to see that. And I think a lot of the folks who were participating in that, and this is again just a comment, were folks who wanted to do that work. And again, encouraged them because it was folks who really wanted to do the work and we recognized the need, but also seeing that as an opportunity for us to reinvigorate today is also like not a missed moment in time where we invested resources into something. I like the fact that we're personally staying with something that started out great, had, I think, a lot of support across the district and outside of it. So I'm just happy that we're doing that again.
I think the other piece that's important to the Pillar 4 work is, in addition to actually having these cadres and the cultural competency, teacher positions that we have in the buildings now, we're also, as an education office team, talking about how do we embed this in professional development days for our staff, so that people can get differentiated professional development based upon their knowledge base and where they are in this work. And how we can continue to grow their understanding of it as well, because, optional means that some people can opt out. But if this is embedded in the strategic plan, then it needs to be something as well that we concentrate on that is not necessarily optional.
Thank you. Thank you. I had some questions around the social emotional tier number 3. The first was around cell phones, and because I know we are not pursuing dramatic shifts in the approach to cell phones so much as trying to actually enforce what we already have in place. But I'm curious if that fits into social emotional goals, and because you mentioned vaping, and my mind also went to that we've been hearing about cell phones being in presence similar to vaping that is distracting. So I was just curious if that's on your mind and whether that's part of the.
Not necessarily a part of my pillar, but I know.
It's actually a part of the next pillar.
Then I will hold that off. I wasn't sure if it's.
Yes. It actually is in Pillar 5, which is the climate and culture for student success. And it is really led by Mr. White as the safety manager. But what we've been talking about and what we've been thinking about is how do we actually create places that students want to be and that feel safe and welcoming and encourage inclusion and positive school environments. And how do we train our staff to provide that for students? So you actually named something that is important because it is, cell phones in particular are a huge distraction. When we actually reissued the student and family handbooks this year, we made the cell phone prohibition language consistent across the schools and also developmentally appropriate based upon the age range of the students. So all 4 elementary schools have the same language in their handbook and 5th grade has particular language, so does Cedar Brook, and then so does the high school. And we have been talking to and working with the principals and the administrative teams in the schools in particular around what does implementation of that look like and how does that fold into the student code of conduct. I think the largest thing that I can say just in my experience roaming through schools, I don't see it at all at the elementary level, or even at EP, to be quite honest. It's the 7 through 12 level and the access piece, because I think that's the point where families give their students cell phones and then students have to self-regulate. Students are aware of what the requirements are, and it's right now being implemented heavily by the high school team in particular. You can see teachers often saying to students, put your phone away. It's definitely not allowed in class. But it's a work. It's definitely a work in progress. Because it's just so prevalent. Right. And some students have 2. So.
I'll give you myself.
Like, go to a restaurant, about your family, everybody's there. It's definitely a lot to manage. So in terms of this pillar in particular, like we have been actually paying close attention to making sure that the school facilities themselves are safe and welcoming. And Mr. Holman and his team have been working with the principals around remediating issues around facilities, making sure that the facilities are clean. And we have been doing all of our safety and emergency preparedness drills. We've already run the ones for August, and the school teams are working with Mr. White around the ones for this upcoming year. But really thinking about continuous school improvement and how all of these things kind of blend together to create welcoming environments are incredibly important. And that's what we focused on for last year. For this year, we want to make sure that we continue to train our school safety officers in particular and really maintaining and building relationship with students. And we have already started as well providing the safety care training. There was a safety care training that went on here last week in this room, as a matter of fact. But we also have reconstituted the district-wide Safe Schools Committee. Mr. White leads that process, and we are going to be providing ongoing paraprofessional training as well, because our paraprofessionals, especially in our special education classrooms, work most directly with students, and making sure that they are well prepared is really important. And again, having our education office team, particularly our directors of special education and student services, partner together in this and really thinking about how all of this blends together for purposes of our SEL and PBIS programs, which are, of course, very big structures in our MTSS pyramid in particular. So all of that is for our next, pillar 6. This is really around communications. No questions? You want to get it?
Do you want?
No.
Keep going.
All right.
Chain reaction.
Because I'm going to go through pillar 6 and pillar 7 pretty quickly, because both Mr. Kaufman and Mr. Swigart are not here. These are their pillars, but they definitely have been working with our team in really making sure that they are building out the appropriate communication plans. The new website has already launched, and we're really thinking about how we are sharing information in terms of communication cascades. And that goes into this idea of how do we create communication plans, not just for the entire district, but we've been thinking about it around like, how do we create communication plans for particular initiatives? Making sure that information gets out to our community in the most effective ways will be incredibly important. And then obviously for facilities, just making sure that all of the things that are necessary to maintain the school district's infrastructure are there and are being maintained. So last year there was the feasibility study that was actually brought forth to the board. The high school stadium project in particular has been one that I know has been talked about recently. And also, just so you're aware of some of the things that we have already completed and things that are being implemented almost to fidelity. We do have a time and attendance software situation, Frontline. And our paraprofessionals in particular are now actually able to swipe in so that they can record their time as they come into the buildings on a regular basis, and then they can actually swipe out. So it's been very helpful to keep track of, people's time cards, and we are trying to now automate systems that were previously paper-based. So we have been moving in that direction, and it's been pretty effective. And there's a number of next steps, particularly around some of the capital programs I'm sure you are all aware of. So that is our strategic plan. Also in the appendix, you will see that there's a number of different slides around academic performance in particular that are here for, consumption. But I will pause there and see if there's any additional questions.
Thank you. Ms. Rep.
You can go, yeah.
No, I don't. My question, I saw you had a question. That's why
I'm already talking, but okay. Going back to 3, just for a moment, pillar 3, yes. First of all, always MTSS. I feel like every time we hear something about that, it's positive, it's moving in the right direction, and that's just, it's gonna touch everybody. It's gonna help everybody, no matter where you are. So especially as we talk about when and how we're improving that time as well, MTSS, definitely shout out to that. Got a follower here. The vaping, I know when we received a report around, I think it was safe to say data, it doesn't show up at all really in the data, but clearly it's something that is happening. And so it seems like it's a really huge challenge. And so I know we have like our student assistant program around substance abuse that I'm learning more about more recently. So really just more of a, is that something that we're having more of a structured approach to, or is it something that, because if it's not popping up in data or reporting it?
Well, it pops up in the phase data.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and that's the student self-reporting. So that's kind of one of our areas of focus, as I mentioned. So this year we are more targeted on that. And so we are partnering with Aldersgate, and then David Fialco from Cheltenham Communities and Care did a presentation for us 2 years ago for our counselors and our safety officers. And he does parent presentations and student presentations. So we're starting off with the town halls at Cedarbrook for the 7th grade students. He's going to be coming and doing a presentation there, and then working with Dr. Hammond as well to bring them to the high school. We're kind of working on formatting, whether it will be like grade level assemblies, but this is all in the works to take place in the next 2 months to, again, target that particular issue.
Oh, happy to hear that's that intention behind it. So it seems like it's huge. It's a huge challenge. And then so that's helpful to understand. If we go to pillar 4, the incident and discipline data. I know I've asked this question a couple times in different ways, but does that include the use of seclusion in discipline and incident data?
Not directly.
Okay.
Because they report that separately to me.
Yeah, okay.
And I do have that information. I did just pass that along to Savage earlier this week or late last week.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's it. And the cultural proficiency framework, I think that's number 4 as well. How much of that is public? Because I know previously,
Yes, we came across a version that had been, I guess, released in, I want to say 2018-ish. So it definitely needs to be updated. Luckily for us, we have a lot of colleagues that have done this work, so we have some models that we can look at. And within the DEBI subcommittee that we are working with, we have already started to think about what does it look like to bring this to a point where we are looking at a draft, we're putting it out for conversation, we're asking teachers to give us feedback on it. So my hope would be that we would have something finalized by the end of this school year, particularly to marry and to go with this curriculum cycle and the materials and resources refreshes that we're going to do. Because the whole idea of a cultural proficiency framework is to give teachers a sense of like how we embed it into our school day. But we also have to look at it in terms of the materials and resources that we're purchasing. So I think it'll be really relevant for us as we're moving forward. And it's going to be quite a bit of work because there are many opinions about it, to be quite honest.
Thanks. Pause there.
Any other questions about those last 3 pillars?
I just had another follow-up question around, actually first, connect the dot. I don't know which pillar it applies to. Last year, I think it was last year, we received a presentation from the sort of the environmental arm of our facilities plan. It was like a 50-year plan of different things. But one thing they talked about in that presentation was the way beautiful and green spaces can actually have a tangible impact on happiness and student outcome even. And so I just wanted to make sure that was, since you weren't here when that discussion was happening, but it's kind of part of a background part of our feasibility study and might have relevance for upcoming goals within next steps. If there are any low-hanging fruits, or maybe even literal low-hanging fruits that could have impact on
Potentially.
right
Yeah.
social wellness.
Absolutely.
My other question is, Mr. Epps, when you were talking about sort of I think you mentioned with vaping educational component, and that made my mind go to our health curriculum, which over the years has been a little bit atrophied. I don't know its current status, but that's another one where I wonder if we could leverage something like that to have impacts on not just the vaping, but just in general sex ed and understanding your identity and what you're going through and the sort of social emotional wellness aspect of that as well. So I wanted, those are topics that I didn't see in the slides, but might be relevant.
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting that you said that because our PE and health teachers, they actually had a horizontal meeting as well. And they have actually had 2 this year already. And that is something that they put on a list of conversation points and questions for us over here in the ed office. So I think it is something that we're gonna have to revisit. And I believe those texts in that particular type of curriculum is embedded in our 6-year cycle. Because obviously we need to buy and purchase materials for our health teachers to use. And I have my own curiosity around when that was last refreshed and at what levels, because we don't necessarily think about health as being something that's important to our kindergarten students, but curriculum has evolved, definitely. So we can look at what a whole K-12 health curriculum is.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lohman. Just to throw out something else that I asked, not asked about Mr. Chris before, is kind of, and Dr. Riley's also, that, where sort of our school library program fits into all of this, and like our librarians, and do we have certified teacher librarians, or do we have certified educators in the library, which are 2 different things. So I'm curious, and I ask those questions because what we're talking about in terms of what we want graduates to know and be able to do, we're talking about inquiry and people being able to engage in design thinking and deep inquiry. Those are the skills, especially now, especially CTLs coming out of school now, are being taught to do and use, learn, and teach kids how to do. And I mention that partly because librarians are always on my mind, and also because they really do cut across every subject, right? Horizontally, vertically, like, and how are we using what we have? Do we need to get, staff that are certified teacher librarians as opposed to educators who maybe pass the praxis or maybe aren't CTLs? They know very different things. And so I don't know where that all stands.
One thing I'll add as it relates to, because the health and PE group that met for vertical and horizontal conversations, libraries are part of that as well. So when we talk about those sessions for our teachers, it's every single educator in the district gets engaged in that work. And so our librarians are part of that as well. And so they've had both, and for them, we have to do both more often because there aren't as many of them as there are other educators. And so the horizontal and vertical conversations have to happen for them because we don't have a lot of horizontal work across the district. It's only at the K-4 level. But therefore, there's a lot more vertical conversation.
We can get with Adrian, because your real question is around what are the certs of the librarians?
Partly, but no, partly, but no, not exactly, actually. That's part of it, but it's also more sort of what are we doing with our library? I mean, what are we doing with?
So what is the program?
Yeah, what's the program? I mean, the Pennsylvania does have a curriculum. I just pulled it up right now. It's from model curriculum for learners in Pennsylvania school libraries. It's aligned with the state standards.
Okay.
It's vetted. I know some of the people who wrote it. Like it's really good.
Okay.
So a few years ago, our librarians met and did do a continuum by grade level of expectation for students K through 12. And then in addition to that, actually pointing a part of the cross articulation meetings we did this year with them to look at the state standards and see how that overlaps and embeds into the continuum that they created about expectations for students throughout the district K-12. So that work is in progress and has started. And that framework for K-12 library, I just reshared it again just to ensure that they were working off of that document as we do the alignment, ensuring that we are meeting the needs as stated by the state standards.
Okay, yeah, and they shouldn't, I know I said this for a big believer, don't reinvent the wheel. lovely model curriculum for Pennsylvania learners. You know, like, don't, you know, they don't have to necessarily go in. There's people who've done a lot of work on this that they don't necessarily have to go back and redo. So, I don't know. I just put that out there because I think we could be using, I don't know how we're using them. I wonder how we're using them. I think we could potentially be pushing in more. They could be going you know, I don't know what their contracts are. I don't know any of that. But I just like, how are we, you know, using them to make sure that students are engaged in deep inquiry, thinking, you know, analysis, like that's what they do, kind of, so.
No, that's easy enough. 7 schools. We can definitely.
Thank you, Ms. Lowen. Any other comments? I just have 2 quickly, just towards the end there, just glad to see the work continuing on crisis communication planning, because that's something that we have not had, you know, a really clear plan for that. So I'm glad to see that work being done. And also that we are continuing to prioritize training for our paraprofessionals. I know a lot of that seemed to start last year, and I know that there's more time built in now for that to happen. I think that's great because they are, especially not just in our special ed classrooms, but with all of our students there, we're expecting a lot of them and they need the tools to be able to do that work. So just thank you for that. Any other questions on strategic plan update? Any questions? Is there anyone in the, I didn't ask yet. No, okay, just checking. All right, I think we can move on to our last topic.
I would like to invite Dr. Matt Pimental over. He's going to actually do the presentation for us around the federal programs review.
Well, clearly planned.
You know, it's funny, not just the Eagles.
It's not really funny. I was saying that earlier. I was like,
I was looking at
I think you didn't plan the grade.
No.
Synergy,
Okay, the moment you've all been waiting for, federal programs. So I'll be reviewing our federal programs for this year. Part of it is also that I am the federal programs coordinator now, which I wasn't before, but that's a new part of my role. So I'll be walking us through an overview. So for starters, we receive our Title I funding from essentially 4 sources, Titles 1, 2, 3, and 4. And as we move forward, we'll review what those 4 titles are, what that means, and the funding associated with each one of these categories. So starting with Title I, Title I is coming out of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which is currently sort of revised and lives under ESSA, which is the Every Student Succeeds Act, which is the act that replaced No Child Left Behind. So that's kind of like the dominoes for how all this comes to be. And Title I is really about the financial assistance for districts and individual schools that have high percentage of children from low-income families. So Title I is really about low-income family support, is essentially what the funding is for. So there are essentially 2 ways that an individual school can receive Title I funding. Something called school-wide, there's something else called targeted assistance. All of our schools receive what's called targeted assistance. That's the way that we constructed our grant for this current year. That's not something we're locked into forever. We can change that in the future, but this year we are using the targeted assistance method to apply the funds for the schools. So targeted assistance is really about helping disadvantaged students within those schools to be the recipients of the bulk of the funds, as opposed to a school-wide approach, which is, like the name would imply, more spread across the use for the entire school. Whereas target, we're looking at who are the students who need the help. We're going to focus the funds on those students. That's really fundamentally the difference. And so the criteria that identifies a Title I school, this is just an important thing to understand. The criteria that allows a school to be flagged and identified as a quote unquote Title I school, because there's enough students who are low income, that criteria is not the same criteria that targets where the funding goes for the individual students in the school, which is a very easy thing to get tripped up on. So in other words, you've got like one set of criteria that sort of plants a flag in the ground outside the school and says Title I school.
Then the students inside the school who receive the funding are a different set of kids. They are identified through our metrics, where we say, here are the students who are failing or at risk of failing. And we identify those students and they receive the Title I support and funding. Even though they might not, there might be a student who is low income, but they're, you know, an amazing student would never show up on that list, even though they actually were one of the students who helped quote unquote to identify the school's Title I. So that's just an important thing to understand. So there are some rules around Title I targeted assistance. It must do the things that you see listed up here. This is from the state. It's a must-do list. It has to provide accelerated high-quality curriculum. Accelerated doesn't necessarily mean above grade level. It can also mean finding a student who's well behind their peers and accelerating them up to the rigorous state standards for grade level. That's what they mean by that. Minimize the removal of children from the regular education classroom. You can't use Title I funds to like create a school within a school, is essentially what it means. Review the progress of eligible students on an ongoing basis. That's like basic stuff, right? Look at data. Be incorporated into the existing school planning. So you have to like have it be a part of how you run your school. Use effective methods of instructional strategies that rely on evidence-based research and coordinate with and support the regular educational program. So these are the must-do components for targeted assistance. This is a list of allowable use of funds. So the state says, all right, your targeted assistance, you get the money, here's what you can use it for. And these are all the things that we could use it for. You can notice that in the middle there, extra supports aligned to the school's regular education program is highlighted for a reason. As we get into the actual funding, I'll show you why that's highlighted. But we have focused our attention on that particular avenue of allowable uses of the funds. Tracking and implementation, we are required to have a plan, and its implementation, it has to be regularly reviewed and revised at least once annually. We do it more than once annually, but that is a requirement. You can't just set your grant, as they say, and then just let it run for the whole year and not look at what's going on. So you have to come back and have a regular look at how the students are doing who are receiving the title funds in targeted assistance. Supplement, not supplant. So Title I funds can only be used to supplement the funds that would, in the absence of such federal funds, be made available from state and local sources, and not to supplant those funds. So you can't like run whole programs using just title funds. There are provisions within the law that require us, and it's a good thing that it requires us, but they require us to have parent and family engagement. There's a lot of data to show that parent and family engagement has a positive effect on student learning. So it's a requirement within the law. Specifically, if you receive $500,000 or more, which we do, you have to set aside 1% for that specific function. And then it's stipulated that 90% of the 1% must go to the buildings that are designated Title I for them to run parent and family engagement directly from the building. 10% of the 1% can be for the purposes of the district to get the word out and to let people know and to run parent-family engagement ourselves. So Title I allocation for this year, $590,000. The vast majority of it is going to support the salaries of our reading and math specialists at the Title I schools. And so they are able to provide targeted support. They're able to provide direct support to our targeted assistance students by identifying those students and then providing targeted instruction to their specific needs, whatever they may be. So that's why it's a good use of those funds and why it really aligns with targeted assistance. In addition to that, supplies, professional development specifically related to Title I. That's not just generic professional development. Parent-family engagement, which is a part of that, and then homeless students, supplies and resources that they need to access instructional programming is a part of this as well. So moving on to Title II, the budget allocation, $124,000.
Let's pause.
Sure.
See if the same person.
Are there any questions about the first, Ms. Henry?
Yeah, I do. So can you go back to the slide about what is parent engagement?
Parent-family engagement?
Yeah, parent. What are some examples of what that constitutes, what that entails, parent and family engagement?
So that's a good question. Generally, at the building level, it's everything that the buildings use to put on the parent-family engagement night can be a big part of it. So anything from supplies, snacks, things to get parents in. Also, communication is a big part of it. And our Cheltenham elementary team actually got, when we were working with the state last year, they were highlighted as having one of the best parent and family engagement strategies. They had a whole bingo night thing that they did that was like related to parent family engagement. And so it's things like that that the schools use for that purpose.
Just to piggyback, so the family engagement night does not, even though we have we have targeted funding, that engagement night does not necessarily it's not available only to the families of the students that the targeted funds are going towards. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a good question. So your Title I night is usually open to the entire building. You don't invite just the students who are
Okay.
receiving the targeted Title I
Okay.
services, right? But the Title I night is separate and apart from your back to school night.
Right. But it looks like any other family engagement night, only we know how it is being funded, but the idea is the same as any other family engagement. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah.
And I went to that bingo night and it was last. I was the one before, right? Let's do really quick, I think.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the slide 12, which is the expenditures. And I'm just curious that like the high school doesn't qualify.
The high school is just not Title I. It's not a Title I school.
Because
The percentage of students at the high school who are low income doesn't meet the threshold. Because we often get that question. People are like, but what about my school?
I'm just curious. It's just
yeah.
really interesting to me which schools qualify based on criteria, like in a vertical sense. Like there are families, like it's the same families. You would think. So you would think that. I don't know.
I think the high school was on the Title I list 2 years ago, maybe. It was on fairly recently, I think, for a year.
And then not again.
I think it was
Yeah,
before
1
that.
year, yeah. And our elementaries have fluctuated a little bit too.
Yes, they have.
Yeah.
It's a yearly designation, and so it can change from year to year.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Sure. So Title II. Title II is federally funded, there to support and assist teachers in skill development, and as you can see bolded here, and also the quality of instruction in core academic subjects is a large part of it. Professional development and creating a more conducive environment for learning is essentially what the funding is for. So jumping right into the allocation, the vast majority of it, again, for a different set of salaries in this case. This is around, there is a particular provision within Title II that allows us to provide funding for the purposes of class size reduction. And so the funding for this year, we've allocated a large portion of the funds for that specific purpose. And then in addition to that, the 27,000 plus that you see there for the non-public school programs, that amount is not determined by us. Like we don't get to pick that number. That's a formula that produces that number. It's based on headcount at those individual schools, which you can see on the right-hand side, the individual school allocations, that's just based on their enrollment. And so that money is essentially siphoned off for the purposes to support Title II needs, but at the non-public schools. And then you'll notice at the bottom, there's a line in red there. And if you have a math mind, you might notice that these three numbers do not add up to 124,000. You're not wrong. Just hold that aside for a moment. We're going to come back to that and it will make sense. So jumping into Title III. So Title III is really around English language learners and also immigrant student support. And so Cheltenham School District, we participate in the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit's Title III Consortium. So the MCIU runs a consortium. Many, I want to say most of the districts in Montgomery County are a part of that consortium. So we transfer our funds to the MCIU, and then they are then able to consolidate and produce professional development, resource procurement, so on and so forth, for the purposes of ELL students. So that's what we do for Title III. And you can see the breakdown there. We are stipulated we can move 75% of the funds to the consortium. And so we also use funds in addition to that for the purposes of resources for students. And then we get into Title IV, which is $57,000. Title IV, it's titled Student Supports and Academic Enrichment. It's there essentially around increasing the capacity of states, local educational agencies, schools, and local communities to provide all students with access to a well-rounded education and to improve school conditions for student learning. And that part is bolded because what we've chosen to do, there is a provision in the grant application process where you can transfer funds from Title IV to Title II, which is what we've done. So we took our Title IV money, we moved it to Title II. And so this is a repeat of the slide you've already seen. And you can see that's why there's that line in red at the bottom and why it's separated out. So we're using basically Title IV and Title II for the purposes of classroom size reduction. And that's the way that we've arranged it this year. And that's the title review.
Thank you, Dr. Mostal. Do
Very informative.
do we have more questions about the last few?
The class size reduction is happening at Winco and Cheltenham Elementary. Is that in particular grades because we have a larger number of students in certain grades, or?
Yeah, so we have, I was just reviewing this with Mr. Swigert as well. We have the data for all of the class sizes at the elementary schools, and we've allocated it toward the schools that would benefit the most from having the additional teacher. It creates the better ratio by applying it to the schools that we apply it to.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Is there anyone else?
Oh, wait, I do actually have a question, another question. I sit on the MCIU board, happy to have money go to the MCIU. But I wonder at some point if we want to reconsider that, if giving 75% of our, what is already not a very big number, let's be real, like $28,000, 75% $28,000 to the MCIU consortium is like necessarily the best use of funds, especially if our English language learner population is growing. We've saved $7,000 for ourselves, so I'm not sure.
So what it allows us to do is allows us to purchase resources at a greater discount in terms of servicing our students. Like there's specific resources that the IU purchases in that group, in that consortium, that would be more expensive for us to purchase outright. But by us being a part of a larger group, then the cost is cheaper to us. In addition, they provide free professional development for not just only our ELL specialists, but for our teachers and administrators as well throughout the year, that we also take a part of for free. So, and also we'll get opportunities to attend conferences that embody into those funds as well. So that we really do maximize our use, although we have roughly about $10,000 that comes back to the district, but we definitely maximize the use of the funds that goes to the IU because they give us so many additional services. That would be more cost prohibitive for us based on the dollar amount they receive. Here, I use.
I think you bring up a value. Because when you think about the amount of money that we get per child, as our EL population grows, at some point we might outgrow the consortium model. So we have been, and we actually talked about it this week, we've been monitoring that number and looking at what projections look like so we can make decisions about future expenditures and whether or not we remain in the consortium moving forward.
What do your calendars look like? How many blue boxes are they quicker? No, that's position below it, but anyway.
No,
So many things happen.
managing the federal program
Yeah.
is that, I think why it's now part of your job.
Yeah, no.
It's a big chunk, and I think that if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Pimble, the managing the Title III funds that go to the other schools, we are the ones that have to manage that. Even, right? Like
The Title II funds,
or
yes.
Title II,
Yes.
sorry, we like have some, like, we have the reporting duty
Yes,
for that,
correct.
even though it's not our money,
It's our
not our school,
responsibility,
it's our
yes.
responsibility, so it's kind of an onerous task as the as our amount that we get grows, right? So, thank you for that overview. Any other last, anyone wants to make it till 9? We have 5 minutes. I think it looks like everyone's good. Thank you so much. Thank you again, Ms. Savage, for a great meeting and for setting us off for the upcoming year. And with that, I will take, and to all of our presenters, thank you. It's been a long night. We appreciate it. And with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right.